Hello and welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to paint a little section of a beautiful harbour. It's the little boats that are moored in corners and the reflections that make the atmosphere. This is the evening light. If you went in the morning, the water would probably be dark green. I start by making a rough sketch in pencil and then claiming the space in the paint. Sometimes when you're drawing in pencil, you can't always decide on a complicated thing like a boat where things are, but the paint seems to clarify it when you've got a shape of colour. If a boat's made of plastic, it's sometimes harder to see where parts start and finish, but this one's wood, and you can see how it's constructed, which is very helpful for drawing it. So I'm putting in the oar. It only has one because it's steered from the back, not from the sides. There's a little hole in the back. You can see where they put the oar. And it's picking up the sun in different places. So some of the wood is light and other areas are very dark. By picking out the dark areas, it makes the white boat glow in the sun more. It's painting in the negative, really. It's just looking for the dark areas and going round the white areas, leaving just the white paper at the moment. So with just a few strokes, I'm revealing the seat and the shape of the boat. And then I'll proceed to the rope around the edge, which will also give it shape. When you've got to do a sweep of a boat or a long sweep of something else, get a brush that you're happy with and practice on a separate piece of paper first or on the palette, and just try doing a continuous line. The idea is that you're resting your hand on the paper while you're doing it. It's not too difficult, but if you say don't spoil the painting, do it on an old envelope first. Once you've made the line, you can thicken it by doing a line underneath, and then I can match it to the other side, and then the rope starts to appear, but you need to make your mark first. Don't go straight in with a very thick line. I'm mixing 2 or 3 different blues to get the underneath of the boat because it's catching the sun in different angles, but it's nearly the colour of the sea, which is nice. The most important thing is to start at the front with a point and then let the lines taper to infinity towards the back, or in case of the far side, just where it goes out of view. And then the reflection on the water is slightly darker. The white paint underneath is much darker in the reflection, so I'm going to put the lines of the wood in just as grey lines, and then I'm going to use some of the paint that I've got on my palette of the blues and browns and just make almost dirty water to wipe across. So I've just mixed some very weak blue, putting that on just to show that side's in the shade and that side's sunny. And then coming down, I've got all the blues and browns on my palette. And to use those gives the picture more harmony. So I'll put them on from the back. And clean the brush, dry a brush, and go in from the front with the lines of planks. Don't have to do every one, and the others on the other side are lighter, so I'm just going to do those more in blue. To make a suggestion, don't have to do too much, less is more sometimes. And just feather the edge out. I'm just going to dab it with a piece of kitchen roll just to make it a bit lighter. Now with the blue on the brush, I'm just going around the joins. There's a tiny bit of lighter shadow. And at the top on the gunnel. Now that's got to dry before I can put the reflection of the rope in. So what I can do is put in another pencil line so that I leave room for the rope over the blue water. And if I stay either side of the line, there should be a natural gap. Saves you getting carried away and filling it. On the beige line, I'm going to do the same. It's a much thinner rope, but shows you the principle. And then there's a dark mooring line, so that doesn't matter. So whilst that's drying, I can go onto the reflection of the fishing boat, which you know it's a fishing boat, but you can't see it, which is quite fun. So mixing up some earth colours, I'm using raw sienna. I'm just going to try not to put my hand in the paint, just go across. And then the lines change to much darker on the right, so I'm going to change to burnt sienna. And get a point where I finish. And then the gunnel that's upside down that's visible is all brown. So I'll use the burnt sienna again. And that goes to the middle window. Always have something to map it against. And it is a gunnel, so it's got to have a firm edge. So a little bit more water again. Just make sure that it's a solid edge, because that'll look better against the blue water. And then the cabin is much lighter, so I'm going to mix yellow ochre, perhaps with a bit of Naples yellow. And then it's got darker again at the front. So I just mix some blue with the burnt sienna. And that bit's obviously in shadow. And that's got 2 or 3 different colours of brown on because it's catching the light. So I'll start light and then go in darker. So I'm using yellow ochre. And some under the sail. Fishing boats have a steadying sail. And this is a punt, so it's only got 1 oar, it's got no rowlocks, so the oar goes in the back. So now I'm going to mix a bright red, any red will do, and some orange, and then a little bit of chrome yellow just to make a really bold colour, and put in fishing buoys. And then I can work out the tones from them. And they've got shadow on as well, so they're not the same colour all over. I'm going to put those in, and then I'm going to add some Indian yellow just to make it brighter on one side, and then a different red to make the other side darker. And I'll leave those to dry and do the same with a reflection of some fishing buoys on the roof of the upside down boat that we've only got the reflection of. Right, the next stage is to make space for some more white lines that are going to be on there. So I've got perhaps a rope or something reflected, so I'm just going to put that in. That'll remind me it's there. And I've got a couple over here. So I've got one that just goes like that, and a darker one that I'll put in. And then there's one that's very wobbly there. So now I need a big brush. I'm going to use a big flat brush. I'm going to make up some blue. This water's probably going to take 2 coats of paint to cover. I'm going to make a start. I'm starting at the back so I don't put my hand in it. With a flat brush, I can go up to anything that I want to avoid. Against the first pencil line, and then take the water sideways. Now it doesn't, I'm not going to have a join there because I've got some ropes to put in, so I'm going to make up another batch of colour using cobalt turquoise and French ultramarine, and coming forward a bit more French ultramarine to the bottom line that I put in. Up to the reflection. Going around the reflection very carefully. Then there is a rope floating on the water that I'm going to go around here. I've only got one line on that. Mixing up more paint. Better finish if you use a bigger brush. Then around the middle of the loop of rope. Doesn't matter if I've got pieces of white paper showing. And then going to the back again, so I need the paint slightly darker because it's further away, so slightly different ratio of French ultramarine to turquoise. Going up to the bow of the boat that's upside down. I've got to save some of this paint because you can see the blue through the windows. Bit more water. Just bring it gently forward. And through the middle of those two. Trying to get an even finish. Now I've got to go in the little dip where the oar goes. And working my way over. So you could put latex down. Just going to even that off a bit. And the blue goes all the way through there and in the windows. So now moving forward, so it will have a second application but to show detail. So this stage is covering the white paper up to the rope. Fill the space and then go sideways just to make sure there's harmony. And then go around the buoys. Around the white rope. There's a few more bits of equipment to put on that boat, so I'm just leaving a ragged edge. And coming forward to do this last piece. If you're worried about going over something that's a different colour, you could put a piece of paper on top and use that as sort of a buffer. Well, that's now got to dry before I can do any more. I'm now going to put the reflection of the rope in, which starts with shadows. So I'm mixing up some Payne's grey and indigo because I've used indigo in the picture already. And then start from the back of the boat and put the shadow in next to the rope, which is easier to do first. and it doesn't go all the way, then it changes to the rope, which I'm using raw sienna for, and just putting lines in to show the way that it's formed. When it's dry, I'll probably put a wash of very thin yellow ochre over it, but I'm starting with the lines first. And then there's other shadows and reflections, but I'm just making my mark to show where the rope is on the boat. And the same the other side, that it's quite dark in shadow, and then it becomes lighter. So back with the raw sienna and just put the lines in. Go over the wet paint, just make a few marks, it'll separate. And then up to the front. I'm going to get some indigo on the brush, a little bit of the Payne's grey, just make a dark colour. I've got number 2 brush, and just define the lines a little bit more. There is a reflection, so not everything is straight, but I could just dab off a little bit. Some of them are bolder than others. And the other side, they're much lighter, so just making a very, very diluted mix. And again, just dab it with a tissue, dab it back a little bit, just gives it more of a uneven pattern. And then getting a bigger brush and some paint and just putting in a little bit more of a shadow. And at the front, and there's a dark line at the front which helps give the boat its shape. And it's very, very dark in one area, so I'm just going to put some dark paint in and let it flow. Now the next thing is the ropes. So I'm going to use a rigger. If you haven't got a rigger only takes more paint. You can do it quite easily if you haven't got a rigger. You just have to have spare paint ready to go along the rest of the rope. So I'm just going to make a straight line, and then I can add any obvious patterns to it later, but I'll just make a line. And then there's a rope floating here, which I'm going to also do in a similar colour, and again rub the pencil out. Some ropes float and others sink, but it just adds to the atmosphere of the place. And then the other lines are white, but they are natural rope. So I'm going to get a little bit of grey and a shorter brush this time, just a normal small brush. Number 2 brush or a number 1 brush, and just put some lines on, just to show it is rope. Less is more in this case. Just do them at a tiny angle. So you could do this in latex, and the same with the other side. They do go across the boat, but I'll deal with that later because I've got to highlight other areas first. You don't need to make every mark, but it just suggests it nicely. So going into the middle, there's a shadow under the seat. So I'll put that in. And anything else that I can find that needs to be made a little bit darker, and then I can put the white rope in. So just mixing up a nice warm woody colour that glows a little bit for the sides of the boat, just to give them a bit more warmth. Sometimes you have to claim a space and then go back with another tone, but it all helps show the white. And that's as far as it goes before it's in shadow and much darker. And then the oar is a different wood again. So I'll put that in raw sienna. Just use the brush and just take a little bit off because it's catching the light there. And then the rest of it is quite dark. So I've got the original mix and I'm just going to add some indigo to it, make a dark colour, and go over the colour I've already got, missing the rope if possible. Changing the angle of the brush to show the point of the boat. And it's not quite so dark there. I'll make it a bit lighter. And then right at the back, it's very dark. I'm not catching the sun at a much steeper angle. So now I can go back with a smaller brush and do the same, slightly more detail on the boat behind it that's got dark showing. And I've already got the colours mixed up, so I'm halfway there. So I'll start with the dark brown and just go around the cabin windows. Even though it's a reflection, it's got an awful lot of detail. I'm just going to go back and lighten this piece because the way it's catching the light is less visible. And you have to watch the reflections carefully because they don't always go the way you anticipate. And then I've got one very dark line here, and then a wiggle in the middle. And then thinner lines. And one in front of that one. Not much, but it makes a difference. And then again, got dark at the bow of the boat. And it's got some numbers on the hull. So while I'm here, I can stick those in a very dark colour. And they're only showing half upside down. So I'll just stick in what I've got in my sketch. So that one remains a mystery. And then we've got the black lines to put in that are reflections of some of the superstructure. So as they're dark, I'm not going to take the pencil out. I'll leave the pencil there. Just going to drop in some more paint into the same spot just to make it a little bit more intense. It just float its way through the paint. And then there's some dark lines up the rigging. And again over here. And the dark one going back from this boat. And then that seems to be sinking. And then there's other lines coming up from another trawler that is out of sight. So I'm going to let that dry for a moment. But what I'm going to do, the line that's sinking, I'm just going to make it a little bit thinner where it goes under the water. Just with a flat brush. I'm just using a small brush and I'm going to emphasize the planks on the boat. These old boats are made of planks and they've got supports going down, and then you can see where the wood goes. and the supports actually go down into the shadowy area. I'm showing you because then it's easier for you to do a boat another day, because you might find that they're not in shadow. So you just put them down. You got the idea. And they go all the way down so you can see them in that bit as well. And then the next thing to do is to put in the much darker water. My reference, it was very, very bright blue. So what I'm going to do is mix up a lot of paint, because I need to let some of it, I can't put the whole lot on at once. I've got to go round things. So I'm going to make up a larger amount than usual so I keep the continuity of colour. So I'll come back to that in a minute, but before I do it, I'm just going to put on a few little details that are easier to do with the colours as they are at the moment. So there's a few areas that are still in the reflection of the boat in front. You can go around and just keep finding things. Just find a few, and then it helps put the deeper colour in. And more ropes. And the shadows on the boys, I can put in a suggestion of them. So just picking up some shadow and a little bit of reflection here. But when I put the darker colour in, it will all look far more vibrant. So I'm just checking. I've got another fishing buoy that's showing. I've just gone around a few areas and tidied up a few things. Just put a few more darker streaks on the boat and in the reflection there. And I've just used a flat brush to remove some of the oar from the rope. And when it's dry, I'll just put some lines on the rope and finish the oar either side of it. There's always little amendments to do when you're painting. I've mixed French ultramarine and Viridian together to make a bold colour. I'm going to go over the water again, which is easier to coat it the second time. And just go round, making it much darker, which will highlight the white boat. You do need to make up a reasonable amount of paint to do a picture like this. So spend a couple of minutes making it up. Try and cover everywhere. I'll go back into the middle. I'm using a size 8 brush to do this. Go sideways into the reflections. And then when the rope was sinking, I narrowed it down yesterday when I was doing it. Then bringing the paint forward around the rope. And by leaving the 2 pencil lines there, you can get a good edge. That's it, round the reflection. Keep coming forward. You can do it quite quickly with a big brush. round the floating rope. Just keep working gently. I've gone over the floating rope because I wanted it to look different to the white rope, but I only gone over it a little bit. If you've got several things in the picture, you often want them to look slightly different. Just keep going gently. And so if you made up a big batch of paint, you'll be fine. Around the reflections. I'm trying to do everything sideways if I can, but sometimes it's not possible. And if you just give it a moment to dry, and then you can add extra highlights. I started going round anti-clockwise because that was the best spacing for what was showing. But I'm doing the fiddly little bit last, so I've got more continuity with the area of more sea. Just get a bit closer to the boat. I'm just getting a smaller brush and going back around here where it's quite complicated, just putting in a few more sideways marks. And the nice thing about it is the deep reflections through the wheelhouse windows of the boat. And then there's little things like the reflection between the two ropes there. So I just put a few little dobs in. Just straighten things up a little if it's possible. And this area here has got a few lighter lines, so I'm just going to make it a slightly lighter paint. Just put a few lines in where it's catching the light. And again at the back here there were some lighter lines. So just adding a bit of cobalt turquoise. Now I've got to let that dry now, and then I can finish off other things. What I can do that I'm not going to touch the water is just put in the ends of the oar against the rope. So that's left a gap for the rope now. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video and that you'll go for a walk round a harbour soon and look for something to sketch yourselves. Thank you very much for watching.